Hello everyone. In today's episode we're going to take a look at the image quality from the new Tamron SP 15 to 30 millimeter f2.8 DI VC USD. Now this particular lens is one that I've been really anxious to try out, and so what I'd like to do in today's episode is just kind of give you a look at how it is actually resolving and how that image resolution is holding up by comparing it with a couple of other lenses. The first comparison is a prime that has outstanding, and it's well known for having exceptional performance, and that is the Rokinon or Samyang 14mm f2.8. Now, that lens, it's inexpensive, but it's well known for punching way above its actual price point, and so it has really great image quality. And then also we're going to do a comparison where we're going to add into the mix the Tamron 24 to 70 f2.8, and I added that in because I have it on hand. It's a proven performer. I've had it for 2 years, and I know it to be a very sharp lens, particularly when it's stopped down for landscapes. And so let's jump in and let's look at some of the conclusions we see as we compare these two shots. And so first of all, I've done a series with each one of the lens where I started at f2.8 wide open, and so you'll see that those exposed at about 1/3200th of a second, and then at f4 1600, f5.6 1/800th of a second, f8 which will be 1/400th of a second, and then f11 which would be 1/200th of a second, and that's true for all of those. So we're going to draw some conclusions here. So first of all, let's take a quick look at the first from the Samyang or Rokinon lens. Now this is wide open f2.8, and you can see I've chosen a shot where there's a lot of depth to the scene and a lot of resolution details here. And so we're going to see that even though it's wide open here, you know, our resolution is actually quite good here, and you'll see that there's a great deal of detail that's in all of these fine details from these branches. Now, as we go deeper into the image, of course, depth of field isn't as fantastic as what it will be when it's stopped down. But as we look up into the corners, and it's only when you get to the very extreme edge that we're going to see the resolution break down. Now, one thing as we look at the image as a whole is you'll see that the Samyang, it vignettes very heavily, and you'll see that it protrudes pretty close towards the center of the image circle. Now note that all of these, they're all the same variables on a tripod, mirror lockup, a 2-second delay, and so that there are no other factors involved. And there's been nothing done to them in post. They've all just they've just been imported as raw files, and we're looking at the actual raw files with nothing else done on import here. And so now as we move on to the first lens, the first image from the series, from the new Tamron lens, we're going to find, as we look into it, number one, you'll notice that the color rendition is very different. For some reason, and I hadn't really noticed so much until I compared it really side by side with some other lenses, the Rokinon or Samyang, it renders really warm, and so I actually had there with me, I had an iPhone 6, which I took a shot just of the kind of the general setting, and you can see that in the actual blog post on this. But you'll find that this is much truer to what the actual color of the scene was, and for whatever reason the Rokinon, it renders really warmly. Also, you'll notice that although wide open, there is some vignetting here. It's not nearly as strong, and it doesn't protrude as far towards the center of the image. So as we begin to look at the resolution here in the corners, we see, well, wow. I mean, if anything, it's even better than what the Rokinon was. I mean, look at the fine detail here in the branches, and that's on the extreme edge. As we move towards the center, I mean, textures here are really strong. And I would say even going out towards infinity, we're actually seeing more information that is here. So we move towards the right side. You can see here at extreme corner a little bit of softness here. But even as we move up the side of the image, the resolution is even better. Now, one thing I do note, whether or not you can see it on a YouTube type video, is that there is a little bit more fringing here. It's very faint, it's very well controlled, but the prime is definitely winning that comparison. Now, if you, I think it'd be really beneficial here now to look at these images side by side. And so let's jump in and let's look at these and see what we find as we look a little bit closer. And so here you'll find that the Tamron is on the left side, the Rokinon is on the right, and so number one, obviously they don't frame exactly the same. The Rokinon is a bit wider. But you'll see that, number one, the vignetting is helping to hold down the Rokinon somewhat. But even that aside, as we move into the image some, here's some comparable textures. You'll see that the resolution is definitely better from this new Tamron. And look at this tree here in the distance. And as we look at these, now I think that maybe the focus was a little further out on the Tamron compared to the Rokinon. And so I don't know that that is a completely fair comparison, but even here in the foreground, look at the difference in the contrast here between these two images. And when I say the word contrast and micro contrast, that's something I'm definitely picking up from this new Tamron. It's a huge lens, but kind of like the Zeiss Otis, it seems like they spent that size for a reason, because the contrast is superb. I mean, look at this, how much crisper it is in those fine details. And so this is wide open at f2.8. And so the good news is that these lenses are both excellent. And so now if we compare, let's compare the two f4 images side by side. And we're going to find that a couple of things will happen. Let's jump back here and let's just do the comparison view and maybe fade out our side lights here. So let's take a look at the f4 here as we jump in. Number one, okay, you can tell already because of the color rendition that on our left is the Rokinon, on the right is the Tamron, and once again, there's still a noticeable edge at f4. Look at here compared to here, a noticeable difference in the actual texture sharpness and the micro contrast. The Tamron has exceptional micro contrast here, and as you look towards infinity, look at how much better detail is rendered. And let's look at these power lines overhead and look at how much sharper they are. This really is shocking to me because the Rokinon is an amazingly sharp lens, and it holds up very well when I've compared it even to the Zeiss 15 millimeter. And so I'm really, I can't tell you how blown am I away by this result. I expected the Rokinon to have a slight edge, considering it's a prime. It's very, very sharp, and but this comparison is telling me otherwise. Now we're at f5.6. And once again, obviously there's a difference in color, but although they're getting closer now, I still see definitely an edge in contrast and probably still a slight edge in resolution. Now we're seeing that these are starting to resolve a little better for the Rokinon, but still you can definitely see finer detail. And let's look at the comparison on the transformers up on the poles here. I mean, noticeably different. When we look up at the power lines, wow, that's not even in the same ballpark. And then we move off to the sides, the periphery of the image, and the only thing that the Rokinon is winning here is that it has no chromatic aberrations at all, and there is every now and then I'm seeing just a faint bit, but of course that's very easy to correct for these days in post, and it's just. It's not an issue. And so anyway, amazing. And so the same thing continues on. Let's just skip over F8 and let's just go directly to the comparison at F11. And there's not going to be really any surprises here. Just one thing I do want to note is that you'll find, if you look at these images overall, that for whatever reason, the light transmission seems better on the Rokinon. It seems as you get towards f11, and I noticed that even in terms of the exposure value that the camera wanted to select, is it showed the the Rokinon exposing somewhere about 2/3 of a stop brighter than what the Tamron is. And so that being said, as we'll look in a moment at the Tamron 24-70, the light transmission there seems to be about equal. And so I don't know if there's any aberration here. It's actually the Rokinon. And so as we look here, this is the extreme stream corner, and by the way, when you're talking extreme stream corners, this is it's a great performance from either one of them. And once again, the same proves true. At this stage, resolution to me is pretty comparable, and although there's a difference in exposure, the contrast is closer here. With the Rokinon, it looks very, very good. Of course, they both look exceptional. But again, as we look, for example, at these trees, there's still maybe a little bit more detail here. As we look towards infinity, of course, this a little more detail shows up on the Tamron because of a slight overexposure on the Rokinon. And here I would say there's still a little more contrast on some of these fine details. Let's take a look up at our power lines. They're closer now, but the darks are still darker when it comes to the Tamron. I'm blown away by this lens. It really is impressive. And so finally, let's just jump over and let's compare side by side the new Tamron compared to the Tamron f2.8 24-70. And so you'll see we're at 24 millimeters here and then at 15 millimeters. So obviously these are going to frame quite a bit differently. No surprises there. And so you'll see on our left side we have the 24 millimeter from Tamron and then the 15 millimeter. And so let's dim the lights here and take a close look at these. Okay, number one, you can see just at a broader view that the color is closer here. I would say that the new Tamron is still a hair cooler, and I actually found the Tamron 24-70 to be a bit warmer. I would say, having just spent a lot of time with the Zeiss Distagon 15 millimeter f2.8, that this new Tamron's color is very, if I could use the term, Zeiss-like. And by the way, also this micro contrast is very Zeiss-like. Tamron has stepped up its game to a new level with the optical performance here. So as we jump in, let's look at these extreme edges. It's enough of a difference that I've wondered if my copy of the 24-70 is decentered. I mean, look at that. Oh my goodness. It's not even comparable. The contrast is so much better, and the textures are so much crisper here. Obviously framing different, but even if you were to crop this image in, I think that you would still find the detail, the contrast to be better with this new Tamron lens. That's really an incredible performance. And as we get out towards the image periphery, that becomes very, very obvious. I mean, the contrast here is just much better. Let's take a look at those power lines. And now here it's a little bit closer. Obviously here we still have a little bit more contrast than we do from the Tamron 24-70. So it's closer, it's better than what the Rokinon was. But overall, let's look towards infinity and see what we get. Once again, there's a noticeable difference in the actual amount of micro contrast in the far shoreline, and then as we look out towards these trees here, it's closer than what it was with the Rokinon, but the right edge, I would say, looking at this comparison, I would say compared to the rest of the image that this lens is actually somewhat decentered, and you can see that this left side of the right side of the image is not holding up nearly as well as what the left side is, and so that's a whole nother problem. But anyway, let's take a look. We won't look at all of them, but let's just jump towards the f11 images. And so here is the f11 from the that's the f8. Maybe I only have an f8 from the 24, so we'll compare that with the f8 from the other then. And okay, and so let's jump into those. Okay, so you'll see 15 millimeter on the left, 24 millimeter is now on the right. Framing difference, let's dim the lights and take a look here. Okay, so as we go into this corner, okay, taking a bit for the textures to pop in. I mean, both lenses are looking quite good here. I would say there's more micro contrast in the new 15 to 30, and texture detail is definitely still better in this new Tamron, and this is a nice performance now. I mean, I knew already that this Tamron 24-70 is quite a nice landscape lens when it's stopped down, and so it's holding up pretty well here. But still, the edge definitely in the contrast I would say the edge is still going to the new Tamron 15 to 30. They're closer now, and still even here at f11 compared to the other side, my right side of my 24 to 70 is softer, and so that's definitely a decentering issue. Resolution is nice here on both of these. Obviously, the framing becomes kind of makes it very different, but anyway, it gives you an idea that this new Tamron is it's an exceptional lens, and so I just for the fun of it, I did a panorama there, and so let's just take a look at that with this new Tamron. I mean, look at that detail. I mean, wow. I mean, it just is, it's incredible. Now, this has had some post-processing sharpening now, and so, but still, I mean, the amount of contrast that is in this lens, this is at f11, it's 3 different frames that are combined in Photoshop, but I mean, that's a pretty epic amount of detail right there. And so my conclusion is that this new Tamron optically is fabulous. I mean, and I love this color rendition. It's so good, and the contrast is exceptional. It's a pretty impressive lens. And so this is the second lens I've been blown away by this year. Canon's 100 to 400 millimeter new telephoto Mark II lens is amazing. And this new Tamron, these are two lenses that, mark it down, are going to be in my bag before the year is out. So I hope you've enjoyed this quick comparison, and it's given you an idea of a direct side-by-side resolution comparison of these lenses. And so there's not much to criticize here in this new Tamron optically. It's pretty impressive. Thanks for watching. If you haven't already, please subscribe. Have a great day.